So it's here we go. I always wondered why Jonathan looks so funny when he did this, and it's because you have to concentrate, so you kind of pull faces. Marc, begin.
I shall. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this new show of Lit Balm on this December 2nd. And this is going to be a whole weekend of SurVision, the Irish Surrealist journal and press. And authors featured from the press include today Charles Borkhuis, George Kalamaras, Charles Kell, Tony Kitt, Jon Riccio, and myself, Marc Vincenz. And tomorrow we have Claire Benzadon, Alison Dunhill, Helen Ivory, Dominique Heck, Andrew Geron, and Jake Sheff. So please join us for both days this weekend if you can. At any rate, we shall start with the show by warming up on the mic a bit, as we usually do. And I'm going to introduce to you, one of our new hosts, Jeffrey Cyrus Wright, who received his MFA after studying with Allen Ginsberg. Jeffrey is best known as a new romantic poet. He's also a publisher, critic, eco-activist, impresario, filmmaker, puppeteer, and artist. Jeff's the author of 19 books of verse, including Blue Lyre and Party Everywhere. Poems have appeared in the Cafe Review, New American Writing, the Brooklyn Rail, the Hurricane Review, Posit. Recent work also appears in the anthologies Best American Poetry, New York Insiders, and Contemporary Surrealist and Magical Realist Poetry. Jeff's latest work, a book of sonnets and artwork called Doppelgangster, is out from Mad Hat Press. And Jeff also publishes Live Mag, which is an amazing print and online journal, which he's been doing for many years. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Marc. Thank you, Marc. What a great program you put together. This reminds me of the one you did like a summer and a half ago in the summer with the Surreal Festival. And I wanted to mention, I wanted to thank Tony and Chuck for putting me in touch with Tony somewhat and with some other people. And Tony's great new anthology also of surrealism. I know a lot of us are in there. And yeah, man. So I'm going to read a little sonnet. Headlining at Ichabod's. Late November sun, a pale feather, a feeble offering from a fickle sky, unshackled by wind, a dry river of leaves races through the park. Mercury's dusty sandals glow red. We come to you with open palms, sworn to serve the flame engravers, faithful to the shadow wing. Asylum lies within you, boo, meringue. Silence, mine, playing horseshoes with halos, dancing on unceded land, using a brownie mix. We did good, on the same page, in differing books. And so thank you again. And it's going to be a great program. Thanks, Marc and Cassandra and everybody.
Jeff, you're going to read Cassandra's bio?
I probably everyone knows it by now. We can just skip over it.
No, not at all. If you don't have it handy, I'll just do it. You know? Cassandra Atherton is an award-winning prose poet and an international expert on prose poetry. Her prose poetry is widely anthologized and has been translated into Japanese, Chinese, and Korean. She's published more than 30 books and is currently writing an illustrated book of prose poetry on the Hiroshima Maidens with funding from the Australia Council and the Victorian government. Cassandra co-wrote prose poetry and introduction and co-edited the anthology of Australian prose poetry and is currently working on, what's it called, Cassandra?
Ekphrastic poetry and introduction is at this point. That's the title.
Okay, I'll go for it.
Okay, well, I thought I would read because Tony's such a gracious editor, and I have had a co-written couple of poems in his journal. So I thought I would read one that was published recently, co-written with Paul Hetherington, called Valkyries. The TV's mute. The vase has grown a single eagle's wing. Long brown feathers flap like fingers against the glass. Broken words flash neon on the floor. Valkyries are riding on fires and storms over solar panels like grids for battleship. The ancient mariner's wedding guest sits on the back of a long-necked albatross, strewing snow-like down. The bird sprouts arrows like Saint Sebastian and begins to speak in tongues. There's clattering on the roof and antlers are reaching from your skull, nubs and rising velvet branches. The vase flaps towards a strafing sky. So next we have the intrepid Marc Vincenz, who is an Anglo-Swiss American poet, a fiction writer, translator, editor, publisher, designer, multi-genre artist, and musician. He has published over 30 books of poetry, translations, and fiction, including more recently 39 Wonders and Other Management Issues, The Pearl Diver of Urunmani with White Pine Press, A Splash of Cave Paint with Spite and Dival, and a chapbook, An Alphabet of Last Rites with Chavina Barber. The King of Prussia is Drunk on Stars is forthcoming in January 2024 from Lavender Ink. You'll be able to see the cover of that on Mark's Facebook because it's gorgeous. So you should go and have a look at it. And later that year, The Visitation, a novelette from, you guessed it, the incredible powerhouse that is SurVision. Marc is also a prolific translator and has translated from, the regulars can join in here, German, Romanian, and French. He's published 11 books of translations, most recently an Audible Blue, selected poems 1963 to 2016 by award-winning Swiss poet and novelist Klaus Merz, which just won the 2023 Massachusetts Book Prize for Translated Literature, which is super exciting. So it's an award-winning book that's award-winning. And Marc has had his own work translated into many languages, including Japanese, Chinese, Russian, French, Italian, Romanian, Greek, German, and Icelandic. I think we should add to that list. If anyone knows a translator from a different language, that would be very cool. I want to extend that list into the whole world. He's currently working on a novel entitled The Age of Occasions. Vincenz is editor and publisher of Mad Hat Press and publisher of New American Writing. He has lived all over the world, from Brazil to China to Iceland to India. He was born in Matilda Hospital on the Peak in Hong Kong, but he now lives on a farm in rural Western Massachusetts, overlooking Herman Melville's Greylock Mountain, Melville's inspiration for Moby Dick, where there are more five-banded tinid wasps and little wood satyrs and mini bagworms than Homo sapiens. I hope I got that right, Marc, because you threw it at me this morning. Will you read for us?
Of course. This one is called In the Gilded Age with Marcel Proust. 1. Within a budding grove. To acquire the means of happiness was to plan parties and suppers and picnics. You'd change clothes 5 or 6 times a day. Then comes the divorce in high life, a palatial scandal of dramatic proportions, a sensation in New York City. Of course, the underlying principle was never discussed. 2. The captive. What happened in Paris remains in Paris. Do anything, just don't flaunt it, was the decree. But the season was coming to an end, and the powers that be had removed themselves from harm's way. Who doesn't want to retain custody of their own God-forsaken children? Social standing can teeter in the blink of an eye. 3. The fugitive. Yet the sensation suddenly found her bearings, married a robber baron, and built a palace with faux Versailles gardens and servants with powdered wigs and polished brass buttons, with canapes on every silver tray, and fish eggs askew on the curved silver spoons that went on forever. Either way you look at it, it jellifies, becomes form. 4. The way. Meanwhile, every evening the barnyard owl watched from the cornices. Yes, she was tending to her young, 3 minor offspring, one with a deaf ear, another born with stars in her eyes. The third, a healthy specimen, was predestined to become that forever one. The pinnacle was when her firstborn was coming out. 5. And then time regained. Here was the light in the Gilded Age, light in general. It wasn't until they reached San Sebastian, where her husband originally having hailed from, that the oysters came into view, and with them too, the canapes and the duck salad, the foie gras and the gras fumé. Meanwhile, another was born. She too, with her mother's freckles and curls, faced the madding crowd and became beautiful. Thank you. And I am now delighted to introduce Charles Borkhuis, who's a poet, playwright, and essayist. His 11 collections of poems include Rearview Mirror, Disappearing Acts, and Alpha Ruins, selected by Fanny Howe as finalists for the William Carlos Williams Book Award. Charles was a curator of the Seek Poetry Reading Series in New York for 15 years. He won the 2022 International James Tate Prize for Poetry from SurVision, and his poems have appeared in 10 anthologies. His plays have been produced in New York, Hartford, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, and Paris. He is the recipient of a Dramalogue Award, and his play, Blue Period, was selected as one of the 10 best plays produced in San Diego in 2022. Charles, welcome. Do we have sound? Where is Charles? Has Charles disappeared?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I especially wanted to thank Tony Kitt at SurVision and Marc at Lit Balm for bringing us all together and having this reading possible. So thank you guys so much, and Cassandra as well. I'll start with a poem called Incognito. Tongue-tied at the tip of a hat, the silent aperture through which the world gets in with its tired eyes and terrifying nostalgia for a future that never happened. Blame it on climate change or the time it takes to become a walking cliche. I'll be the first to admit my original is hiding out in a witness protection program under an assumed name in an unnamed country. Perhaps you didn't notice, but I'm representing him at this very moment. Same face, same body parts. I'll take the double-blind Pepsi challenge anytime, anywhere. Finally, we can finally say with certainty, I am you. And who can argue? With a salient simulation that responds to your every command. If you can't tell the difference between your replicant's thoughts and your own, then there is no difference. Be assured there are countless others who would love to take your place. Silent multiples stand in the wings, each hoping to go on for their 15 minutes of TED Talk sincerity. Finally, a chance to express themselves. If only you could see the world through my pinhole of light, everything would become clear. The problem is that there are too many stars in the sky, waving, pick me, pick me. Too many beautiful, bright colored toys left on the beach before the next tsunami sucks them out to sea. The ocean eats everything in the same motion. Paris floats by to take back its statue, but we are all the same with more freedom, free to like, free to buy, free to agree to be someone else when we leave the house. So brand me. So take my eyes with you When you go, I'm not using them. Now you see me, now you don't. Tell it to the lost ones, squirming in the shadows under the bridge that connects us. My tongue extended through a slit in the curtains to be cut loose from the next word would be enough. Stop fidgeting with your gadgets when I'm talking to you. The mind is not an on-off switch. You're not really here, are you? I've created you to fill in a void, tonguing my ear gently, a perfect hole in one. Always make sure you've got enough tech up front to avoid an accident and subsequent scar tissue from forming. But the debt is too deep, too pervasive to clearly know what has happened, what consciousness, who's lost, what, where did we go? I need more clarity, more time. Oh, robot, hold me close. I can almost hear what you're thinking. The future would be better without me. Take my knees as collateral. I'll walk on my hands just to keep the blood flowing. Leave it to the mythbusters to twist their facts into a more practical you. Here, the romantic divide. There, the huff and puff of genitals reaching for the sky. So easily seduced by a giant ear. What you want to hear over and over, please put a stick between my teeth and stretch me out on a board in case I go into an operatic fit and become a flapping fish out of water. Fists in my pockets, fear of drowning on air. When the curtain goes up, you must promise to play me as yourself, so as to convince the silent witnesses, the heavy breathers behind the lights, that you are me. Spotlight on an adjective, nounless and flailing about on the old boards. I'll walk the plank off a drunken boat till the ghosts come home. Talk to Hamlet in my dreams. Miniature golf, anyone? Stand me up and let me think. Why do golf balls look like shrunken heads? Why does the sentence flow backwards and stop in the middle of a thought? Just give me a moment to remember my lines. Alas, poor Uruk, knew him, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest. Why follow this or that stranger on the street, or a poem through its petulant permutations? There is brain damage on the tracks. Someone has fallen off the platform. Someone on a train is running lines with a friend. Someone has left his heart in San Francisco. Someone takes out her teeth and falls asleep. Someone dies and is reborn as a character in a play. Someone throws up in a nearby sink. Someone screams, a new poem from a mountaintop. Someone breaks for lunch. Someone near tears fiddles with the buttons on her coat. Someone on stage asks, got $1 for a slice? Someone pulls a bloody someone off the tracks. Someone looks into your eyes for a moment, hesitates, and moves on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charles. I was seduced by a giant ear. What a line. Next we hear from Charles Kell, who is the author of Ishmael Mask from Autumn House Press, 2023. Charles's first collection, Cage of Lit Glass, also from Autumn House Press in 2019, was chosen by Kamiko Hahn for the 2018 Autumn House Press Poetry Prize, and a chapbook. Pierre Masque was one of the James Tate Poetry Prize winners with SurVision Books. Charles is assistant professor at the Community College of Rhode Island and editor of Ocean State Review. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you so much, Mark, and thanks everybody. I love Lit Balm. I love SurVision. It's a great space. I always hear some wild and different poems that are completely out of the mainstream of contemporary poetry. It's always an honor. I love my SurVision book, with which Tony and Mark and everyone, Anatoly's helped me so much with Pierre Masque. And I've been obsessed with Pierre Glendenning, the protagonist of Melville's Pierre, the Ambiguities. Mark's out in Melville's neck of the woods. I'm not too far. I'm in Rhode Island. Mostly, I'm obsessed with Pierre, but Pierre has taken on a life of his own, and I'm starting to write all these Pierre poems. So tonight I'm just going to read a handful of brand new poems. First one's called Pierre in the Evening. He's reading Dostoevsky again as the lamp flickers and rain pounds a bedroom window. Where did those lies go? Tumbler of J&B up to the brim. Whetstone leaning against the wall. There's a love poem dangling in midair. Pierre, alone, is wearing women's underwear. Knife under his pillow, repeating. Ivan kept staring at him. He seemed to have lost his tongue. There is a white horse in the night sky running, a rose and a severed hand clenched in its jaw. Sky falling. Here's Pierre in this poem too. He pops up. Hung over in the attic, Pierre slowly wakes to a thud from below. Whisper of voices he thinks he knows. He bites a sloping 2x4, feels fiberglass soft his cheek, thinks, this mausoleum life is for the termites. His mother and sister want him to talk. They're trying to jimmy the lock. The difference between weak and strong is sleeping with one eye open. A rat in the corner laughs. The difference between right and wrong is the rusty nail running in a circle Pierre steps on. This poem's called A Deep Well. The country slept as I wandered through thickets of damp grass. I had wants, inside burned an illiterate lust. Maybe scratching my cheek against the bark of an oak could quell this fire. My eye caught a shimmer of stone, intricate work weaved in a circle. I crept and peered down into a deep well, saw black, felt a cool wind whip my brow. I dropped the small pebble into the void, waited to hear splash, but instead the drumming of palm on flesh. I felt drunk, so I took off my clothes and climbed in. It were as though my feet broke ice, my hot hands slipped down the mossy sides. All at once, a dozen fingers gripped my skin. I heard a piano, then listened to whispers just out of reach. A young boy in a calm voice said my name, then the sharp pinch of a claw on my chest. I know you don't believe me, but I remember being in the womb. I kicked and flailed, let loose a silent scream. I was born a heathen, no fear of this world or anyone in it. I believe nothing, have never mouthed a prayer. I tell you this, dear soul, because I felt the same way down in the well. A demon plucked something from inside of me. Hollow, a cool blade had cut deep. There has always been dark waiting to be set free. The demon tore skin and let it loose. When my sister was sick, my body broke out in angry yellow boils. I attacked each with a needle, squeezing the pus into small vials. On the day of her funeral, heavy rains turned the hillside cemetery into a muddy mound. Hail stormed, cracking a window. I drank and was healed. I painted in oil on an unprimed canvas, the cemetery, mourners, my sister in her death shroud. I etched a small demon by the edge. My flesh sated. It all came true. I climbed out of the well, ready to sing. This poem is called The Middle Class. I'm always thinking about class, the middle class. Van Gogh wears ribbons in his orange-crusted hair. We're arguing if those are crows or vultures in the back of the picture. You alternate saying black, chomp, black, chomp. I fight by being quiet. Last year on Christmas Eve, our apartment burned down. Strings of lights popped and tinsel rained, covering the ground like snow. It hasn't snowed in years. The earth is melting, and we're clinging to this painting. We both loathe Christmas music. Van Gogh's ear was eaten by a grackle. Poor folks. We were eating raisins on the porch. Plastic covered the windows. There was a rubber hose undulating in the haze of a scorching August day. Warren, Ohio was real then. You took my red raisin box and stuffed it with ants. In the overgrown grass, a rusted go-kart with snakes hiding under the seat. We slicked them out with a wire hanger and WD-40. The sun broke. You stole half a bottle of Asti Spumante. I pissed in it and it tasted like manna. Rich people. Will you summer in our cabin on the Cape? We will feed you roses. The weather is to die for, ha, great white. We'll tell you about the architecture. Oh, how each was built. How every family sits in the garden. How language spreads over the blanket, ready for a picnic. There's another war. There are too many napkins on the table. We will strip the skin from your bones and bury your bodies in the cellar. We'll stuff orchids up your nose. This poem's called Patrimony. I went to visit my father in hell, but he wouldn't speak. His hair writhed with green snakes, his skin translucent. I thought he was angry until he gestured a scribbling motion in the air. I handed him a pencil, a piece of paper. He wrote in handwriting I didn't recognize. When I arrived, I found my tongue had disappeared. I could only take a few steps before my breath grew heavy. Whenever I lie down, I get dizzy. I've been waiting for you. I'd like nothing more than a cup of clear water. My insides have been stuffed with pampas grass. There is no sleep. Then he started to do fractions on what was left of the page, integers I couldn't understand. Startled at the coolness of the atmosphere. Also, there was no smell or sound. I recalled walking, my feet silent on the smooth ground. Nothing rustled or banged. My nose, dry, empty of scent. Poor father, I thought. My skin burned and itched. I was dying of thirst. I tried to speak, but could barely swallow. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Yeah, I guess it's now my turn as a SurVision poet. I was extremely delighted that Tony published my book, Einstein Fledermaus. And there's a new book coming out called The Visitation, and I've been in the journal several times, and I'm very grateful for what Tony's doing, bringing together kind of the big thinkers in poetry. So thank you, Tony, for that. And here's something new. It's called Thieves' Canto, for Bardolph in the Bardo, where the hero always wins. 1. catalyst. Suffer me in holy water. Somewhere near Damon's Ridge, Timian weighs his essential salts, counts his ducks, geese, chickens, douses himself in the anointing oils he pilfered last night from the temple of unknown saints. In Escalia, he spreads his essential crystals on Dolmetschstrasse down Sigmund's byway, by way of the canal, scattering some into the water, some onto the shore, shoes of passers-by, some across a freshly painted balustrade. In a liminal fashion, he leaps cobblestone to cobblestone. A hooded robe passes, uttering devotions of love. Into the hedgerows, a mouse twitches, weaves, leaps, vanishes. Timian too wishes to disappear into a hole or a hedgerow. Salt is scattered to save the soul. He believes a rock crystal from the roof of the world will give him his best chances in the Bardo. 2. Consigliere. Find me an enchanted island. With salt on his fingers and dirt in his nails, Timian enters the derelict building. In a former life, in Byzantium, I had 3 Nubian slaves, each more beautiful than the other. He whispers to himself, something he is apt to do in this age of miscommunication, and he considers how messages are filtered and filleted and truncated to present whatever words might be needed to win a grand presidential campaign, the grandest presidential campaign. How they should have abhorred the cell phone, he posits out loud, pocket dialing the daily password to his home security system. Meanwhile, staring down for scraps, a rat scuttles up a pipe and across the rotting rafters. Timian enters an old dented refrigerator, wipes the sparkles from his eyes, depresses a colorful pad of blinking buttons behind an oceanic array of steam ovens, enters an elevator and descends. In the underworld, the halls arise in incandescent light, walls higgledy-piggledy plastered in dog-eared posters of the early Bamberg and Hollywood starlets. Stories once told, messages from the sometime slinky once alive, but the snails are all dead, rumbles the apparition blinking with their polyurethane eyes, fluttering with their long nylon lashes. The stars too are spinning into infinity, they say, tugging on their artificial diamond-studded earlobe, turning to face Timian with their deeply wrinkled silicon skin. The narrative commences as Timian takes a seat and deeply sighs. Do you think those hallowed out wings can lead you toward your enchanted islands, Timian? They are made of data and light, just like the worlds that surround you. From the depths of their cloud chamber, the apparition rises, stretches their virtual wings, encircles the entire chamber in a cloud of feathers, and almost appears to embrace Timian. Closer, my angel, they whisper in their high baritone. You know, you are my favorite child, they say. This will be your last duty to your 1,000-year-old Morpaw. Timian has heard this before, but the virtual wings surprise. You scattered the salts, yes? Timian nods. That arouses me to no end, the apparition says. Through the tips of their wings, the apparition enters the organic mind of their offspring, turning toward the underworld as the antechambers arise. A flimsy history passes by. Antimatter weighs less than matter, but carries more weight, says the apparition. In weightlessness, we find our true selves. Tonight, my child, you shall die for us all. 3. Cataract. What extinct creature would you believe? Jesus lands on a beach somewhere along the coast near Caldo. The large Y-birds here are loud and aggressive, their hooked bills scraping the sand and soil for traces of petroleum and plastic, a bonding agent for loosely woven nests of briar and emmer straw. The Y-birds circle above, diving and screeching. Dragon and mayflies rush to the rushes. Worms sink deep into the earth. Jesus throws out his nets and webs like a spider. He collects all he can haul, wraps the Y hatchlings in swaths of linen and cotton, and drives back towards his boat. Only a storm brews dark on the horizon. A wave of rain sweeps across the sea. Then on the beach, lizards dart for cover. Crabs dig themselves in. Snails go still and wait. Jesus and his catch reach the boat drenched. Once inside, he reminds himself to light the stove. Waiting here for the storm to pass would be sensible on the one hand. On the other, the customs guard will pass here at sunset. So, reluctantly, he starts the motor, raises the anchor, and heads along the foaming coast. The hatchlings are screeching, calling for their mothers. Jesus throws them handfuls of minnows and piperfish as he tries to navigate precarious rocks and outcrops. And then, in a moment of indecision, his eyes fail. 4 concertinas. Matter created by antimatter. 30 leagues northwest, in the port of Azul, they celebrate the birth of the second daughter of the virtuous virgins. The priestess sacrifices her gray Y-bird to an android on live sensing. The good pilgrims rejoice and release themselves upon the waterfront, in the tavernas and the markets, all wearing their own Y-bird feathers, dyed in the flagrant colors of the equinox. And there are those who celebrate their planetary alignment by donning their virtual robes. Snakeskin approaches the crowd, waving her banners of glory, for she is the second daughter, and, as is tradition, she is presented with fruits of the sea, insectoids, mollusks, and crustaceans, in a basket woven from the corkscrewed hair of the ocean. In and out of the here and now, she appears as she slowly traverses the grand concourse toward the temple of unknown saints, toward her blood sacrifice, toward her second life. And the virgins lie in wait, wailing and chanting the most ancient tones and prayers and songs. The pilgrims kowtow and prostrate themselves, their long frayed robes covered in dust and time, feet tucked beneath their hems, a journey of a lifetime. For some, the travels have been since their birth along the narrow mosaic mountain paths, through deserts and across the toxic black swell. Some have never cut their hair and wear it as garlands, belts, or tied crosswise across their chests in supplication, until, facing the second daughter, they will rebirth. 5 bling. For power comes from a lifetime of deep conviction. In and out of their minds they flowed, into the thoughts of the other, through the history of the other, until they realized they were one and the same, base pairs. Still, in that realization, they came alive. Some might call it reincarnation, others By the by, the worksheets that week had that damp call and tell me vibe. Yet, when Timian arrived, having died the week earlier, all but the man on the lathe was surprised. A resurrection just like little Lord Jesus, thought the man, in his flimsy loincloth, all bloody from Roman nails, Etruscan whales, the man himself walking across the desert and among his people as one of themselves. And Timian realized he had been reborn in another century, a place unlike any he had ever known or conjured into his infernal mind, and that known devilish mango surprise with coconut cooling sprinkles. The apparition had been killed. The apparition had been so kind. The apparition had been of such keen mind. The apparition had been us all, one and everyone. When the body has been sanctified and the mind finds the shortest distance known to light, which according to Shishamitli, upon his flimsy pedal of Atlantic pine, was like casting a rubber ball into the viper's sandpit. 6. Somewhere in the South Caldo, tangled in the fronds. Let them come and get me. The cult of the second daughter was not officially sanctioned, yet she was permitted, even in the dankest, most rancid basements where rats lived with fleas and fleas with flagrants, or to put it the way of the supreme leader, she was like a cold sore that passed from lip to lip. The valley was miles below and seemed to spread in all vivisections. That morning, the streets were cool and gently warming, and the pilgrims kept arriving with their handfuls of offerings, dry rice and mangoes, wildflowers and plastic bags filled with sand from the Aegean Sea. And sometimes the lucky priestess who poured the forever sand to count the eternal grains of history, which seemed to her like millet fed to her nation for centuries. Timian was among the worshippers that fateful morn. In his new century, he too had washed his feet in the holy river, despite knowing it was contaminated with effluents and discharges somewhere close to its glacial birth. Overhead, the clouds darkened and a cool breeze swept through the market square where all the pilgrims were congregated. Suddenly, the trees rattled and shuddered. Birds took to the air, headed toward the mountain, and the rains descended. A bloodhound enters the scene here. They call him Droplet. He is a decoy for the supreme lizard. He strides toward the second daughter, howling in the pouring rain. The pilgrims cheer. Matter created by antimatter, light created by anti-light. 7. Thus spake the owl priestess, skimming the surface. Another sacrifice. Some think the handouts suffice. A fish cheek or jowl or two would do, at least might ease the matter is said, especially when you shave that fine and scatter them over your udon noodle soup. When you're standing in line on the stoop, smoking Egyptian cigarettes, staring out upon the caldo across the lagoon, watching the Y-birds cast their early threads. Certainly, Saint Jerome has cast his lot. Thus spake the owl priestess, as the wave engulfed the congregation gathered here against imperial decree. Later, the supreme leader strode across his balcony, waving his arms. The cult of the second daughter is no more. And to the gleeful roar and cries below, your supreme leader and the high priestess of the temple of unknown saints sanctify you. The cheers returned. And to you, our Lord, in the name of the Father and the daughter. And then again, overhead the clouds darkened, and a cool breeze swept through the concourse, and out toward the ocean, the crickets went silent. Lyrebirds rushed to the air, headed toward the mountains. Then the rains came. The fish here have all been sacrificed to miracles. Well, who can walk on water, says one. Two says, no one, except the omniscient lizard who skims the surface looking for ghosts. 8, mad harvest. Wheat is meat and more. Second daughter cast wide her net and reeled in all her pilgrims. Found she had caught a giant iguana who, after a coaxing and a neck stroking, calmly settled in her generous arms. Then nestling there, he bristled, and she called him her past and future. She called him her present patience. And she clasped him close to her nipple, held him beyond all the others who wished to suckle there. On that fateful day, someone had the last word, and it wasn't she. Second daughter who cast wide her net. The priestess had a face like an owl. Her brows flowed down her nose and into your inner core, held your gaze there like a pilgrim, like a fish flaying and flapping, skipping across the bow, only to yet again slip overboard and end up in the ocean. So, yes, it was hard to meet her eyes and her brows. Still, she had been apportioned the patience, her highbrow patient patience, as it was said in the great book. Though occasionally there would be a priestess who would look through this like light passing through. She would redeem her vow among the crowd. On those days, there was not so much more to do but hold your breath for the full length of the sermon and look for the light. In those old days when the apparition appeared, hailed first as the new Messiah, then as Orpheus II descended into the underworld to recharge his holy batteries, there was a world once that thrived in obsequiousness, in its own obliqueness, and in that, or a combination thereof, Timian found his second breath, exhaling, yet something obscured his vision. We'd all gone blind in the fury of that neither particle nor wave. Or was it more of a welling up of lost souls? And in that light, beyond the pillars of Hercules, or the Pindar of the present patience, where the illusion of time and space begets symbols scrambling in the mind out of need or desire, like water arriving on a lifeless rocky planet in an ordinary solar system, in an ordinary, orderly galaxy. Our thief Timian wondered if henceforth he too would almost entirely transmute into a bolt of light, 1.5 trillion light years old, or if some data would hold on somewhere, clinging on to a piece of rock for 200 million years. Thank you. All right. It is now my great pleasure to introduce George Kalamaras, who was born in 1956 in Chicago and grew up in Indiana. George holds a doctorate in English from State University of New York at Albany. George has published 8 books of poetry, including Kingdom of Throat Suck Luck from Elixir Press, The Recumbent Galaxy, co-authored with Cardona Hine, Gold Carp Jackfruit Mirrors from Bitter Oleander, and The Theory of Function of Mangoes from Four Way Books. He's also published 7 poetry chapbooks and more than 950 poems in anthologies and magazines in the USA and all over the world. George is former Poet Laureate of Indiana and Professor of English at Indiana University, Purdue University, Fort Wayne, where he's taught since 1990. Welcome, George.
There, I'm unmuted. Thank you. That bio is very dated. I think there's another 6 books, and I'm now retired, Professor Emeritus, after the last 1.5 years. So, but it's so good to reconnect with this group. I read at the Lit Balm reading, I think as was said about a year and a half ago. I'm so grateful to be involved with SurVision and now with Mad Hat Books as well. I owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to Tony and to Marc both for being such big supporters of my work. You know, as a surrealist, it's very easy to become marginalized in the poetry community. And I feel like I have a home. So thank you, both of you, and thank you this community being here. I'm deeply grateful. I thought I might read across a couple of books. I want to read a poem from the first book that Tony did called That Moment of Wept. And these first few poems I want to read are from my longtime series of poems called the Bone Sutras. And there's several volumes that have been published and several volumes that are waiting for publication. I think the project's been going on maybe 20 years. I'd have to look to substantiate it. This is called The Air Was Always Beautiful. Then I emerged briefly as a centipede. I had carried over the karma of math and needed to learn to count on myself for everything. That's not a joke. Forgive me if I believed I'd never lived past 100. Then I was human again, this time a childhood chess master from Peru. I remember grieving the copper miners whose veins corroded like neglected knob and tube, who coughed as if they were in love with death. This was a long time ago. There were decades of black and red, knights flanking bishops, bishops gripping their groin, wanting to jump the queen. The air was always beautiful. I kept a bird in my chest and periodically asked it to teach me how to swim. Now the carpet cleaners have come, bringing me a formula for dust mites. They seem baffled when I say I would never kill another living thing. And here's another poem I want to read, a Bone Sutra from the second book that Tony did called Through the Silk Heavy Rains. The speaker in these Bone Sutras believes, suspiciously like me, I suppose, that he has lived many lives, some very real to him and some imagined. They cannot contain their sorrow. So the mahogany scrape of a bleeding seed laid itself onto the floorboards. So they came and plucked the shaving brush bristles, evoking the entire broadening of the dead wild boar. All my internal organs rise up like Bolsheviks. They cannot contain their sorrow at having carried me so long, so far from what I hoped one day to become. Or is it joy we feel when we kiss goodbye, knowing the stars may or may not camp in our separate mouths? I have sent myself off on many expeditions and always find a shaded fort and clear well water when I arrive. The dead rooster was placed before me like still quivering rhubarb. I thanked the Huns who brought it, but confided that I could not slit the throat. They looked at me as if clothed in freckles. They said something about spotted bedragglement and paintbrush soup and reducing inflammation in the leopard's jowl, and took the neck in their large hand, revealing the scars of Eurasia. And I want to read a couple of poems from the book that everybody still see me okay, because I'm switching screens here, so because my printer is not great. I want to do a couple of poems from the book that Marc and Mad Hat will be bringing out soon. The book is entitled Robert Desnos Finds His Sleep Medicines Beneath Bachelard's Floorboards. And it has, we've worked on the cover already. It has a gorgeous cover. I wish I could show it to you next time. This poem is called, well, we had Dostoevsky appear earlier this evening. So this is called Dostoevsky's Donkey Ride. So it came to pass that every day I wore 3 shoes. I wore 2 on my feet and a third around my neck like a medallion. You might say I was an angry weather pattern. You might place garlic in the mouths of the dead, even now during the seeping of starlight. Say the entire footprint of the fallen garage was enough to house the wind. Say there are copycat heartbeats pounding in our chests. Siberia back in 1849 was one of the coldest places on earth. Most of its fur-bearing foxes knew enough to den up away from comeliness and greed. Once I rode a burro through the streets of Juarez. My sombrero bore the mark of the moon like a heavy stone, soughing goodnight. My Cleopatra headdress said that in a former life, I'd been a milk snake of a man without the woman part of my heart. When Geronimo surrendered and the Chiricahuas got the coughing sickness, their train ride into exile in Florida was a death rattle caught in the throat, many years and the long way down. And another poem from Robert Desnos Finds His Sleep Medicines Beneath Bachelard's Floorboards. This is called Zorba the Greek. As many of you know, I'm of Greek ancestry. 3 of my 4 grandparents came to this country. Zorba the Greek, that dream where Nikos Kazantzakis comes to dance with me on a beach in Crete. The part where Carlos Fuentes arrives and tells me Aura is the one I must love, both the young woman and the hag. The sequence where Kawabata smokes a cigarette somehow through my mouth, not his. Then Remedios Varo comes to settle all the birds that have taken refuge in my brain. Borges dressed in a skirt as her secretary with heels. Dark, lovely water I float into and through, Whitmanesque in all my various mouths. Then the urge to pee and a deeper sleep calming me. And I'm in a coffee house in Madrid, and Vicente Alexandre arrives with the spine of some ancient sea creature from Mallorca. God knows I love him and his primordial pain. Lord knows he holds in his bowels the shadows of both Lorca and Hernandez. That part of my dream where Delvaux confides he's been painting worm castings, not women. And Bachelard begs me not to fall asleep again beneath his floorboards. And all the poets named Rene approach, folded into one another. Crevel, de Maul, Char, and some janitor named Rene from Lucerne who swears he adores poetry but wants to cleanse my mouth. And Julio Cortázar hands me his cat to care for while he bakes bread. And somehow I don't sneeze, though Cortázar is actually outside in the Pampas planting trees. The wind, the terrible wind. Vallejo keeps inscribing me into some book he carries that is actually the body of a dead man. And Arthur Whaley rises from his deathbed at Highgate, where the curtains dance when he speaks, though he looks exactly like Baryshnikov, and translates the body of a dead man into the folding doors of a corpse. And I'm puzzled, drinking tea with Du Fu, who's also Rodney Dangerfield, but somehow I'm also in the garden playing cards with Lee Miller and Dora Maar. And in a tea house in Kyoto, Kawabata returns as Takahashi Shinkichi, who's somehow a giraffe back in Crete, strangely able to swim, when from the long purple tongue of his Dada poems, threatening to consume me. And I'm on the beach again, but Kazantzakis is gone, the wind is gone, and the dark waters arise to the sound of the Suntory, and I sense they are afraid of the dawn and the clarity of meaning it might bring. And then I'd like to close. I have my latest book is this 300-page tome brought out by the wonderful Dos Madres Press about my Greek heritage, literary kin and familial and family. It's called To Sleep in the Horse's Belly, My Greek Poets and the Aegean Inside Me. It has 20 some pages of wonderful archival photos of my family as well. Many, if not most of the poems are about my literary kin, and then some about my family, but of the literary kin, many are lost, forgotten surrealists. And there's a wonderful surrealist poet whom I adore, Hector Kaknovatis. And this poem is called Apparently Hector Kaknovatis, with the first line by Kaknovatis. Apparently, it could not be otherwise. Apparently, the kerosene lamps had been set in your chest. Apparently, even your mathematics could not save you. And the onslaught of the junta tore your tongue. You looked in the mirror and saw a land of blood and hooks. You were Chiron, the superlative centaur, the wounded healer. If the wind in your throat had not been blood, if the blood nets had not been lowered into the sea, if your chest had not been a crowded school of trapped fish, apparently, though, it was. Apparently, it could not be otherwise. Apparently, when it tried to be, even your chest was only half horse, half man, the third half, an unpunctuated phrase. Leave the commas aside, you pleaded. Allow the world its mouth. The last instant recanted, including the pauses most needed. Otherwise, it could apparently not be. Not apparently could it otherwise. Not in Oulipo and its mathematical madness. You turned to surrealism. You turned to myth. You were the son of Titan Cronus and the sea nymph Philaria. How could your body have been half horse? Your poems, Hector, had grown horse among the colonel's manly stance. You were smart to hide your mustache, to clean your ears with tobacco leaves, to clone your toes. You stood against the wind, crowding your owl, and the forest on fire in the kitchen sink. Apparently, it could not be otherwise. Apparently, your surrealism would have lodged in their throats, declared you decoded of letters not to be trusted, declared you once and for maybe. You were named for a Trojan prince, greatest warrior of Troy. You were said to have killed 31,000 Greek warriors. You, Hector, could have been killed by Achilles himself. What rose in him centuries before, from heel to heart? What caused you to be reborn, half horse, half man? To be reborn in 1920 as Hector Kaknovatos, the poet? You have largely and not, mostly and more. You have mostly not been forgiven, even when you have. You have lit the kerosene lamps in the watery chests of fish. known the sea because a sea nymph gave you suck. You called her mother. You called her phrase without a pause. You knew the enchantment of lamps, the burning word, the wick, the match we carry inside in our mouths is housed the beginning of all sound, the ear and vowel lodging of pain and the loud of the mouth. Oh, Hector, oh, Kaknavatos, oh, Ector, spelled the ancient way as a tunneling within. You have been waiting for the poem to mouth you into sound. You have been waiting in our land of far too few, and words below ground, the pound of the indignant sea, below ground, your casket and its sway. Apparently, it could not be otherwise. Apparently, it could not be. Apparently, it could and couldn't and maybe still can't. Like all things surrealist, the fortuitous meeting of Hector, Achilles, and an umbrella, the chance of horse and man on the dissecting table, like you, Hector Cognovatus, like your mathematics disguised in the tamp of a lamp, where your voice wisely hid those years from the kernels so that you could be with us now and forever. Hector Cognovatus's word without end again. Thank you very much. It's so wonderful to participate with you all today.
Thank you so much, George. Next, we hear from Tony Kitt, who is one of the SurVision editors, and thankfully and gratefully curated this wonderful selection of poets for this weekend. Tony is a poet from Dublin, Ireland. His poetry titles include Endurable Infinity from New Pittsburgh Press in 2022, and The Magic Flute from SurVision Books. Another collection, Sky Sailing, is forthcoming from Salmon Poetry next year. His poems appear in many magazines and anthologies, including Oxford Poetry, Poetry Island Review, The North Ciphers, the American Journal of Poetry, Plume, Matter, Shot Glass Journal, etc. He edited the contemporary tangential surrealist poetry anthology, which is an amazing book. I recommend all of you to get it, which came out from SurVision in 2023. And the anthology entitled Invasion, Ukrainian Poems About the War from SurVision in 2022. Tony has been editor of SurVision since 2022. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, very good.
I tried to unmute myself. Right. Well, thank you very much, Mark and Cassandra, for having me here and for having all of us here, because it's important to bring people together, bring poets together, and to put faces to the poems. I think it's important. So SurVision has been around for nearly 7 years now, and it feels like it was yesterday. And we keep publishing books, and we keep publishing the magazine, and we're planning a few more anthologies. We'll see how it goes, but so far so good. Right, so I'll start off, I'll read 5 short poems, and 3 of them I think I knew, and 2 from Endurable Infinity, the book that was published a year ago by Pittsburgh University Press, University of Pittsburgh Press. Right, I'll start off with the poem called Moonchild. It's a new one. And the poem has an epigraph from Mark Twain. Everyone is a moon. A man full of sea waves, is learning to swim, to breaststroke between the 29 words for sorrow, to uncase the holes of haste. Stay afloat, my black water cat. 2 habits ago, he unchained himself from the moon while listening to an eternity's monody. The eye of a candle through electromagnetic darkness, under certainty. Who splash hopes past us, treading on drowned monuments' heads? Who sings, bye-bye gravitational pull? No weather here, no need to read a fairy map. At the beach, a grove of flutes. The man is an embryo inside a light bulb, shining as within. His intos, been-throughs, and dark ifs, the feline eye of an old radio. Right, the next one is from Endurable Infinity. It's called Close Formation. It's kind of poetic experiment. Hopefully a successful one. Close formation. A hunter trails a long-tailed consequence. It is the 6th nightmare. Children watch eggplants grow meanings. Exuberance exists at the exit. How would you talk to a mind arrow? What would you give for a bulletproof poem? Seasonal dying is the profession one should avoid. I'm doing my beast and you're doing yours. Our genes are our engines. To survive, we'll have to Draculize our story. So how? Ask your napalm, your landmines. Nobody would CNN us to safety. A long-length consequence haunts the hunter. Security by mercuriality. It is the 7th nightmare, meaning plants grow eggs. Right, now one of the newish poems that first appeared in First Literary Review East, to which I'm grateful to the editors. And the poem's kind of autobiographical, is called Words. I once emigrated from Jules Verne to Sir Walter Scott. The wild beasts of my mind cages followed my teen self. The boundary stones were similar, a shirred zebra, a skirt zebra, but I just liked the virgin birds inside. The adverse yellow of the sky passport showed me the way, an open-eyed path. There is always a snowfall inside you. Then the snow melts. Some call it Celtic blood. Right, so I'm going to read another poem from Endurable Infinity called Hostilities. I think it's an opening poem. Yes, it is. It is. Yeah. Those beautiful deadly things, a bomb rain or a bursting night sky mushroom, an imploding mind. If your religion is vandalism, your God is in pieces. Your consciences, hillock upon hillock. Even your language isn't your language. The empire of dreams macadamizes you with images. The sun is unbuttered bread. Life gets oily under a sunflower. Taste the insatiable kiss of déjà vu. Silencers have a thing for your silence. What do you say to a dynamite ape, to a multi-knife scarecrow? Questions queuing up. Satiety, pencil-bodied, an abyss inside the abyss. Well, and I'll finish off with the poem called Sea Oranges, which is also from Endurable Infinity. Do you like sea oranges, Kirida? The ones that yellow the blue? In the waves of experience, they pulsate like a university. When a storm stares at us through sky leaves, I hide inside your autumn. Look at these bubble couples drifting towards the end of imagination. Will they foam like that when the ordinary ordains itself? Or will we do what we were taught and shield a store-bought thought? Where are you now that you are younger than your children and I older than my memory? Are you an abandoned city or a dreamt-up one? I have sent you an orange seed in a bottle that I dispatched down the veins of the impossible. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Wonderful. Next we hear from Jon Riccio, who's from Michigan. He received his PhD from the University of Southern Mississippi Center for Writers. His recent work appears in print or online at the Cincinnati Review, Coast, No Coast, the Ekphrastic Review, E-Ratio, Pouch, and many more. He's the author of a full-length collection, Agoriography, from 3 Etal Press in 2022, and 2 chapbooks, one entitled Prodigal Cocktail Umbrella, and the second I, Romanov, which came out with SurVision Books. Jon serves as contributing interviewer at the University of Arizona's Poetry Center's 1508 blog, or 1508 blog. Welcome, Jon.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Tony. It's great to hear all these surrealist voices. And I've got 7 poems tonight. First one, Clots. A mannequin gives birth to a jack-in-the-box, says to the Harlequin, he has your thighs. The Harlequin lathers his mandible, asks hemophilia how a shadow bleeds. Her son, born with polka dots ajar, the mannequin sells teeth online, posts ivories to inboxes. Platelets tailgate the Harlequin's stubble, venerates a towel that proclaims him ashtray salesman of the year. His wares clang like church bells in suitcases, some the shape of heartthrobs, Idol, menthol, Marlboro, scrim. He crowns a tourniquet, dams his chin. The mannequin sends her son for repairs, 10 hours to a neck, sinew inclined. The boy crouches, weasel, smock, and facile smirk. You'd never know he started as twine. She retires, ministers to the mouthless. The Harlequin expires, Parliament's twinge. The kid asks about Pop. She pauses, breath like formaldehyde on the morning drive. Son, she says, your father was filtered, drummed the cigarillo realms. Yes, once upon a Nicorette, humanity swirled, companionship loomed, lineage bruised. The things he accomplished with ash. Octo Poetics. We raised the starfish, sold it to the cancer ward, split an apricot. Ram willows crumble in July, still Jesus fails his horoscope test. Striated lilac, keep the sanitarium from decrepitude. Ectopic fetus, loved you like an isotope of risk. Goodbye. Alien gravy, money's tight. When all else fails, crop circle placemats. Cheap lighter fluid, the calligrapher's only vice. Sparkle flick font. Fuck with a sea god turned bone setter. Become his patella and conch. Cartridge girl thinks, my toner, his Kevlar. 10 most wanted, here we come. I was diagnosed with a visual disease about 5 years ago, and mostly that meant that I had to relearn the fundamentals of literacy, lots of trial and error with how do I read again. And a lot of those poems resulted in the book I, Romanoff, which SurVision published. Thank you again, Tony. And some of those poems are in the anthology. So the first thing, obviously, when you're wondering, well, what's going on with my vision, is you go and you take a visual field. Visual field. I transpose letters, the carnival clause doldrums as it decides what to negate. My sentences coin operated for years. One doctor thinks dyslexia in the vanity plate of middle age. I see cops and say corpse. Another orders an MRI to tell me why zinnia is ninja, the macula's nasturtium astray. Sometimes I think pirate patch and mean eye surgeon. Bookmark over each line like a hydraulic press. White space self anagrams, scaffolds and iris. The test, a dotted screen fit to a vein. I make more eye contact since my diagnosis. Decades of backstory wrapped in peanut brittle. Hold my demons, dynamite your hand. The contrast portion of your MRI. A crime wave could enter your needle puncture, crosshairs drawn on the machine's ceiling. Given scrubs, shower cap shoes, not the gown you expect. Pay before the tunnel turns hospital terracotta. An hour ago, you assigned petrified man, belt abetting teacher pants. The Hungarian ophthalmologist corrects your pronunciation of Bartok, sheet music for his viola concerto fastened to your refrigerator by ions less godlike. Radiology rug, you've made a tuning fork of the head. A mega magnet interpolates dye the color of inkjet jaundice. Cognition blinks. Toppled silos conveyor threshes gray matter caress. It's a Petoskey stone. I think of my eye photograph on the surgeon's screen. Macular abnormalities, simmering retinal yolk. Nobody outside Michigan cares about the Petoskey stone. Pebble glorified to passage right. See one, skip one. Peninsular youth complete. Outside Mississippi, the nearest specialist for my diseased eye practices in New Orleans. He's booked Mardi Gras on. Some want the king cake. I want to normally read. Chart work sounds nautical. Anchor lodged in sclera. Hematite, your touristy luster usurped by asparagus stands during beach season. I promise not to stare at the sun on Michigan license plates. Bridging my vision changes each week. disease adversary with Hall and Oates and words. If I haven't seen you in 12 months, there'll be a period of mistaken. Vaseline, I'll pronounce you Vaseline. Companion, champion. What are relations but tournaments? It's neurology, not lenses that marks condolence. The song barreling out of that $8 card, private eyes without a face. Billy John Darrell, how you play in a Tucson eatery with croutons spilt into sunflower seeds. Bride of scotomas, a slice of vision loss to stare at each year. Meringue replaces the maculae that have literacy by the balls of my eyes. Paperback rolled into telescope, syntax mignoned. And the final poem is the perspectival we. We anticipate the llama's power animal ascent. Hence calendars of them in human careers. April an optometrist, alpaca toll collector missing the cut. Weep for the blindfold tailor's death, oh unmonogrammed socket. Wheatfield bench press, pre-intervention Paul Bunyan's anabolic flaunt. Wheel to library ladder. Watch it, you're reigning Kenneth Rexroth. Weaned from astronomy to corona, wield a PhD in molecular displacement, but careful of houseflies, though Vincent Price makes a good Montreal uncle. We on the Cthulhu tattoo, cracking my tomfoolery bicep, weave it like a tapestry condolence, my neck stubble, your toes. The Hallmark salesman ordered the fabric vendor after months of witticisms on yarnstormers.com. Weasel, basil, roadkills, spice rack, weed and without, errand, widow. Thank you. And thank you again, Tony.
Thank you, John. And of course, thank you, Tony, but also thank you, Charles Borkhuis and Charles Kell, George Kalamaras, and Tony again, Jon Riccio. And well, I guess I'm here anyway, so I'm going to thank myself.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Mark.
Just briefly before we move on to the open mic section of the show, just remind you again, tomorrow we have another SurVision Weekend Part 2, Sunday, with Claire Benzadon, Alison Dunhill, Helen Ivory, Dominic Heck, Andrew Geron, and Jake Sheff. So please join us for that if you can. And on December 9, the weekend after that, the Saturday after that, we have a Blazebox show with Tiffany Troy, Mitchell Glazier, Kyle Yang, Rebecca Tseng, and Kelly Kennedy. So join us for that too. And so I'm going to hand over the mic to you, Cassandra.
Hooray! Well, it's going to be a great open mic because we're going to begin with John Wessex, and we only have Johns without H's here. So, John, what have you got for us?
Yeah, I'm kind of living vicariously through the comments for the last John. Great reading, John. I'm really loving it. I think it's me. By the way, I'm going to try to do an open mic on Zoom for fiction reading tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So I'll put some information in the chat. This is called Manifest Destiny at the Breakfast Table. The second law of thermodynamics is blue. It counts cognitive behavioral therapy, but fears SSRIs wear suspenders. This is not to say that Debbie bosons smell of mint or that top quarks are too brittle to build suspension bridges, but that Marxism goes best with dry vermouth. When judging the color of economic theories, remember that indigo serves integers for dessert because Gödel's incompleteness theorem is always late for dinner. This is to say, the theory of evolution makes pancakes whenever gravity goes skinny dipping in Kathmandu. Even though cops bust the periodic table because trigonometry uses too much salt, blue is bigger than red. And thank you to Karen and Cindy for putting that in the first literary review ace.
Amazing. I love, there's so many good lines in there. It's always hard to pick one out, but Marxism goes best with Driver Muth has got to be one of my favorites. So, and I love the blue and the red because, you know, the idea of what the eye sees as well. If we connect with the last reader and you can see blue better at night and red during the day. So, John, amazing. Loved it. Thank you for kicking
Thank
it
you.
off. Always a pleasure to have you start the open. We have Roxy next, who rocked us last time and is going to rock us again. So, Roxy, what have you got for us?
Well, I'm going to start spelling my name Rocksy, maybe, like a lot of my students do. But I was saying to Cassandra, I probably shouldn't read again because I just did. Thank you, Mark and Cassandra, for having me. This is called the Iliad of this morning. Just piggyback on some of the mythological themes of today with George and Mark. The Iliad of this morning settles in like an exhaustion flavor. But where you sense an approaching phalanx sweating like a trove of unwanted heat waves, snow crust in June, little deafening gift someone will paint someday as a mural, smarter, mailer than a mere lyric. Frozen in disbelief, the mountain's green faces mock the apocalypse, a bad movie we pay to see because we know the ending. Smug as we melt down the aisles of the Freudian theater, Fort Daw, making a gotcha game of existential terror. Throw our parents down the stairs of childhood on a string. Reel them back. Gone. There. Meanwhile, California shapes itself around a new old idea of itself, conditioning the air with Twain jokes. Firefighters in shirt sleeves saunter down the plaza with grand frappuccinos. Respite like chimes that take that cool tailwind and go to town. We suspect our catchments of unlikely water are a brief goad. Drink, then get real for the coming India. The sonic Texas tells all. We're fine. Just a rosy-fingered dawn unbanned for now. Withering in the spongiform mosaic of denial, it feels like 120 degrees, NPR says. That sounds like something NPR would say. Somebody owns the grid. Somebody left the cake out in the sun. The irony of being there in the future without our faces, like anonymous tufts of grass in the cracked dirt of possibility. What do we have to lose? I'm sure we can find somebody to transplant equatorial species to the Tibetan plateau, bone compost to hold in the 7 rivers of Asia. Sinews show us how to dig down to the shy aquifer, bear the dry days with our heads held high, like bare naked ladies on tall leafless stems, just daring everyone who would rather not. And sorry to bum us out in a winter that's probably where we can escape such thoughts, but thank you for letting me read. That was fun. I'm loving this series.
Thank you so much. I love the cake out in the sun instead of the rain. I never quite got that metaphor in that song because you don't know how to bake it because it took so long to make it, whatever that one is. But the flavor of exhaustion is the one that I think that we all know and love. That was wonderful. Thank you, Roxy. You can read it for us
It's
anytime.
to bring back Rod McEwen these days. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Now we have the effortlessly classy Leslie, who is going to read for us, as she does every now and then. So what do you have, Leslie, for us this fine day, or day in Melbourne, evening, wherever you are?
It's always hard to live up to your intro, Cassandra. I think I'll just bask in it and be silent. But I'll read anyway. This is called Habitat Loss. A grazing of turkeys, the mother shepherding her poults quickly amid high-pitched coos into no cover, only moss, inedible but wiry on the arms of the cedar. Plastic slider bags snap in the branches, odd socks on the sands. The quail come back bobbing over cardboard containers of old salad. No plums, but a linen shroud. Quail, the long distance migrant on the Judean plains, on the Gaza shores. floppy kites caught in the harsh light of moon, reconfigured. Bob White baby now adopted by a turkey mother. There was no cover, only cushions bursting under a dictionary, wailing the side strings of a ruptured balloon, trailing pleated fluorescent green at one now time wrapped around a beak or a ravaged face, a blasted house, an uprooted life. Take us away again, and I will try to be ready. This is not just a local problem.
Wow, that packs some punch. My goodness. The ruptured balloon. What an incredibly visual and stirring piece of eco poetry. That was amazing, Leslie. Thank you so much. Is she still around? Yes. Well, we are very lucky next to have one of the editors of the journal that keeps coming up. Apart from the wonderful SurVision, we have had First Literary East Review, and we have the brilliant Karen to read for us today. So Karen, what have we got?
Hi, this is such a great reading today. Well, every time, but really I loved everybody's work. And happily, I'm going to read a poem that Tony was nice enough to accept for SurVision, and it was in there back in February. It's called The Complexity. Striving to meet an undisclosed standard, the duplicity of memory. All the while, the feeling of a tenured hold, a life grip, reverence for the finger that touched the finger just before arrival. What you brought with you, what you've gained since, what you've lost, here in the glitter coercing your eyes, what you've crushed with your innocence, the unthinking way you move in your space, the sorrows you've collected and heft in a litany of rivers, the ennui, the zeitgeist, the search for resolution, the global suffering screaming in your ears, the glory in the flower, the life force of the forests, the complexity from which you weave your pattern.
That was gorgeous and very stirring. The duplicity of memory and all of those images, some achingly beautiful and some quite bereft. So thank you so much, Karen. You have an amazing voice in the open mic. So thank you for sharing. Cindy's usually next. So I hope you'll bear with me if I read one of her poems. I don't think it's a lip balm without something from Cindy. And I'm really terrible at accents. Like I would give her accent a go, but I would just make it terrible. So she'll have to put up with my terrible Australian vowel sounds. But I noticed that she is in the current Best American Poetry blog with one of her poems that's been remembered as a pick of the week. So it's called Inner Life with Sabotage. This poem will be intentionally vague. Candle wicks flicker, chemicals misfire, crossed wires refuse to untangle. Sometimes I slip into something less comfortable. Carousel horses and streetlights make me weep deeply. My handsome father's death has turned into stilted breath. My benevolent brother's death is still caught in my throat. Everyone gives me flowers to fill the fissure between limbs and loss, and I bury them under layers of what? Nothing but my own undoing. A startled and startling voice tells me to go even deeper than this. Onyx and obsidian wrestle it with a chest full of white diamonds. Frankly, my dear, I have had enough of dancing through the murk with my not-so-better angels. Excuse me while I remove this battering ram from my solar plexus. Let me open my palms to the hazy sunshine. I promise I will stop shaking soon. Cindy read that in the last few weeks, but I wanted to bring that to life again for the new audience that we have today. So thank you, badass poet Cindy. She may be here tomorrow. I'll have to ask Bob, because Bob is the way that you end open mic. There is no other way to end open mic. Bob in his kitchen with his Shakespearean t-shirt given to him by Cindy. So Bob, what have we got for our final word of the day?
Okay, well, Cindy should be here tomorrow, so.
Excellent. You can tell her I mangled her poem for me.
I will. Okay, this is a short one. Distance. The hand more distant than the arm can reach. The river deeper than the air. each word a woman, surprised at her own cleverness. The moon always a kind of explanation. Thank you.
Wow. Well, it's the philosophy of Bob's poems that keeps me going for the rest of my days. So I loved it, Bob. I love the fact I can still see a little bit of the oven behind you that I've been missing to the wall shot, but I'm loving that little familiarity in the corner there. And it's going to be a fabulous show tomorrow as well, Mark. So I'll throw back to you for a final comment.
Oh, sure. Well, thanks again, Tony, for bringing together these amazing poets. And thanks, Charles Borkhuis, George Kalamaras, Charles Kell, Tony, yourself, and John, well, I guess myself, for reading tonight. But tomorrow we have, once again, Claire Benzadon, Alison Dunhill, Helen Ivory, Dominic Heck, Andrew Giron, and Jake Sheff. So don't forget to join us for that. In the meantime, I'm just going to read a very, very short poem, which is called Spell for the Replicator. How does one duplicate, let alone multiply? Looking back into the mirror of time, the fundamental principle evades herself. Good night, everybody. Thank you for a wonderful show. See you tomorrow, hopefully, and lots of love and poetry.
Mwah.